Modern MMA doesn't just reward grapplers anymore. It rewards fighters who can mix it up, who can use their boxing to enhance their grappling. Hear me out. At the highest levels, nobody gets to wrestle for free. Look at the elite. Islam Makhachev, Mighty Mouse, George St. Pierre with his shoot boxing. Each of these fighters strike with purpose, meaning and intention behind each shot, each level change, setting up deceptions, luring their opponents in. In today's video, I'm going to teach you 5 techniques, 5 methods that you can use in boxing that's going to enhance your MMA, that's going to translate best over into the cage. So let's get into the video. Jabbing with intention. When we think about using the jab purely for boxing, we think about controlling the distance, setting up bigger shots, using it as a defense mechanism. It's not much difference when it comes to mixed martial arts. However, the opportunity to mix it up is much greater. 2 jab variations with different purposes, different intentions. The first jab being a stabbing jab to the head. What I'm trying to do with this first jab is I'm trying to keep it long, okay? I'm trying to get my opponent's hands up. I'm trying to load their nervous system through pain, through scoring a good shot, snapping their head back. So this is going to be a textbook technical boxing jab, okay? A stabbing jab. So I'm not just trying to flick my jab here, just get my jab out. I'm trying to cause damage here. I'm trying to load their nervous system. So as I throw that jab, I'm going to take one small baby step, but with no dipping or level change with my legs. The first jab's purpose is to score. So we're jabbing, stepping in, snapping and stabbing with that jab. Okay, trying to score a shot. Now the second purpose and the second intention of this jab is to actually dip my legs. So as I throw the second jab, I'm going to dip my legs. But typically what we do as we dip our legs, we will stab to the body or stab to the chest. However, this time I'm going to stab to the head still. That's going to get my opponent's hands up because they've reacted with the first jab being, okay, they've hit me in the head, my head snapping back, that hurt, so forth. But now what we're trying to do is the same principle. However, this time we dip the legs as we throw the jab, dip, but still come to the head. Now from here, what does this allow? Well, this allows me to utilize my wrestling, judo, and grappling. This allows me to get closer into the clinch position. Maybe that's where I'm planning to be first and foremost, my head on their chest. So I'm going to repeat that same process. So we're first jabbing to the head with the intention to snap that head back. Now the second one is going to be a level change, but keeping it high to the head. So as I level change, now from here, I can repeat that second change. Okay, still stabbing to the head, but dipping the legs. Now from here, I can shoot in. Okay, I can get close. Okay. And this is loading my opponent's nervous system, getting them tired, getting their hands up, posturing up, freezing, and allows me to transition my boxing closer to the MMA game that I'm trying to achieve. Pivots and angles to disturb the rhythm, to create new opportunities for bigger punches, for grappling, wrestling. So we're not just using the pivot here just for boxing. We're using a pivot to change the angle, to use our boxing IQ. We have seen Ilia Topuria using pivots and angle shifts to land bigger, heavier shots, to also be on the side where their opponent doesn't see. Why can this be useful for wrestling, grappling? So when we think about pivots, there's many ways to do pivots. We can pivot to the inside, throwing a jab, keeping the weight heavy on that front leg, and then from here we can shift our feet. This allows us to shoot. This allows us to land bigger shots. This can be utilized on the cage. So when we're pressing the action with our boxing, okay, we're striking, we can now start to use pivots, angle shifts to work, okay, to get our grappling going here. We can strike with our boxing. We can use them pivots. Things aren't working out, we can step the feet, pivot over, okay? Work different ways. So pivoting and angle shifting is one way we can use our boxing to amplify our grappling, especially on the cage. And maybe this is something we're not seeing too much of because traditionally speaking, you're maybe seeing a lot of attacks coming in here, and then maybe our opponent starts to turn away from us, and then maybe that allows us to take the back. But this is ultimately a sneak attack. So we can press the action here, jab, pressures down, pivot over, shot, shoot. Feinting and deceptions, manipulating reactions. We're trying to use feints for level changes, feints for shots, feints for striking, okay? So as we throw maybe our jab, we can throw our jab now with the intention of being loose because we're trying to use feints. So I'm using my jab, okay? Now from here, I'm going to feint with my jab. So you can see that slight adjustment in the shoulder. You can see that I've used that feint. George St. Pierre talks about this a lot, and I'm a massive fan of George St. Pierre, but he talks about loading the person's nervous system. Habib used this as well with McGregor because of the level changes, because of the constant threat of being taken down. He started posturing up high, pressing back, trying to get his legs back. That allows for the boxing to be actually used as it should be. So what we're doing here is we're now using feints. That can be feinting with our feet, dipping low, feinting high, okay? And this is all boxing, okay? So we can land the shot, feint a shot, go for a shot, but using feints is going to be loading the person's nervous system. It's going to set up bigger and better things if our end goal is to be wrestling, if our end goal is to be grappling. So I can jab high, I can feint low, as I feint low, now I can shoot in, okay? So this is why we use feints in boxing. We use feints in boxing so we can set up bigger shots in boxing terms. So if I use a jab, I can feint with the jab, left hook, right hand, step out, feint, backhand, and that's what feints can be used for. But we're trying to manipulate these feints for our grappling, for our wrestling, for our mixed martial arts. Okay, so if I'm constantly feinting, not just staying here, okay, stationary, because if I'm staying here and then I decide to throw a jab, that's all I'm presenting to my opponent. However, if I'm moving around, changing my feet, okay, jabbing, okay, now I can start to use these feints as a way to attack. Advanced boxing footwork modified for mixed martial arts. I want you to study boxing footwork. I want you to take your head from thinking just like a mixed martial artist. Now I want you to focus in on boxing footwork, the art of footwork and boxing. I've made videos on this myself. I'd highly recommend checking them out, but we're focusing now on our footwork. Advanced footwork for boxing, but modifying it for MMA. So when we think of McGregor's karate stance, it done amazing against Aldo, okay? So this movement patterns were based off boxing, boom, allowing for bigger shots. But how can we, as a wrestler, as a judo artist, how can we apply this into our game? So we have to study the principles, the basics of footwork, and then we have to modify that for our game. Now, I don't want us to be just thinking purely boxing. Because if we're thinking purely boxing, it has its limitations, being that maybe it's more of a bladed stance. This allows for kicks, okay? This also allows for takedowns and a lot harder maybe to defend them takedowns. So typically we have more of a bladed stance maybe in boxing, and we're purely worrying about headshots and body shots, but using our footwork. Well, this time, however, we're going to modify that. So we're going to square stance up a little bit more, and we're going to work on different foot patterns that's going to actually increase our potential for grappling or potential for wrestling. So if I'm only just focusing in on boxing, I may find it harder to shoot. So if I'm mixing it up for mixed martial arts, my intention is maybe to have my lead leg, my strong leg, as my shooting leg, okay? So if I'm just boxing, it's going to be very hard for me to transition from here, okay? And then try to bring that foot over without telegraphing to then go into a shot. Whereas if I'm using boxing footwork, okay, I can really change my feet position, and then this allows for me to shoot. This allows for me to be explosive. So I'm always moving my feet. We can also use our boxing footwork as a way to be defensive for anti-wrestling, for takedown defense. So if I'm always moving my feet in different angles, if I'm shifting my feet, what I'm doing is disturbing the pace, disturbing the rhythm. And this is great if my end goal here is to actually defend against grappling, because I'm always being a moving target. It's going to be harder to read what I'm trying to do. I can be faking shots myself, but I'm using my boxing footwork as a way to get out of the cage, as a way to get out of that position where I could be taken down. But we can also, like I said, modify it and use it for us to do the thing that we want to do, and that is to grapple, that is to wrestle, okay? So we have to take the basic principles of standard boxing, moving our feet in linear and safe ways for boxing, and then what we want to try to do is we want to try to modify it for our game, okay? We want to try to modify it for what works best for us. Boxing head movement for mixed martial arts, specifically for wrestlers and grapplers. So what we're thinking about here is not thinking like a purist in boxing terms, because if we are using super dynamic movements the way we would do in boxing, that may be at a disadvantage for many reasons. I've explained this in previous videos when I talked about Ilia Topuria's head movement. We want to be using small adjustments with our head movement to avoid strikes coming in, to keep ourselves safe, and to help us actually use our head as deceptions without telegraphing. So if I'm moving my head extremely dynamic, think about maybe Mike Tyson, think about Ben Whittaker. If I'm moving my head super explosive the way I would in boxing, this can be a disadvantage for mixed martial arts. I want to be subtle with my head movement, subtle with my footwork as I move my head. I don't want to be super explosive, okay, rolling in under. This could be at a disadvantage. And like I said, if I'm maybe dipping my head down here, I can be susceptible to kicks, knees, okay? And this can also be a disadvantage for when I want to apply my grappling. So I want to be using the triangle method, okay? I want to be using small head patterns, okay? Constantly moving my head from shots coming in, okay? And as I dip, what is this doing? This is also putting me in a position where I can start to level change, okay? So as I move my head, one, I'm avoiding shots, okay? Small adjustments with the head, okay? I'm avoiding strikes coming in, okay? Because I'm dipping my head slightly, okay, moving it off center line, but this also now allows me to utilize attacks. So as I move my head, I slip a shot, I can step in through, shoot boxing, again, going back to the shoot boxing. It's not just about blocking, it's not just about parrying shots, it's also about using your head. Boxing specific for mixed martial arts. So we don't want to be dipping too low. We don't want to be rolling too low, okay? We want to keep everything specific for the sport. So small adjustments, using the triangle method, using the U method, okay? Just small adjustments, avoiding shots coming in, taking our head off center line, moving out with our footwork, head movement, and then shoot, okay? So we want to use our head movement not just as a way to defend, but we want to use our head movement as a way to level change, as a way to load our opponent's nervous system, and as a way that's specific for our sport. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do appreciate it if you can subscribe to the channel, comment below and like this video. If you'd like to hear more boxing videos, mixed martial arts, or you'd like to hear my experience in grappling so far, I'd love to make videos on this. And thank you so much for all the support. I'll see you in the next one.